Before we move any further, let me try to save you a bunch of time and a bunch of headache. Because if you can get this, you are going to be so much further along than I ever was. And it all started a few years ago when I first started learning how to share the gospel. I was fortunate enough to meet a man named Wade Aaron. Now, Wade is based out of Dallas, Texas. He has a ministry known as Christ's Reward, and he is carrying the cross to all 50 states, sharing the gospel and equipping people along the way. And I was lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time when our paths crossed. And I was so curious about what he was doing. And Wade was gracious enough to bring me along. And over the last couple of years, I've had the chance to watch how Wade shares the gospel. And I've been in places like Texas, South Dakota, Florida, Utah, and most recently, Indiana. And without fail, every single time that we go somewhere to share the gospel, I wake up, Wade's nowhere to be found. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of an early riser, but this dude gets up early and he is MIA. And at first it kind of concerned me, and I started asking the other guys in our group, like, is everything okay? And they're like, this is just Wade, it's what he does. And I was curious, so I asked him, I said, like, dude, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just spending time with the Lord. And I believed him, and I tried to ask the same question 100 different ways, and every single time it was some semblance of the same answer of, I'm just spending time with the Lord. And everything that we've been talking about hearing from God and asking him, what do you want me to know right now? I asked the Lord the same question. What do you want me to know right now? And what the Lord showed me is what we are going to unpack over the course of this final week. He took me to Matthew chapter 5. We know it as the Beatitudes, Matthew 5:3 all the way through Matthew 5:11, Matthew 5:12. And he showed me that the Beatitudes can be broken up into three sections, three important sections. Section number 1, empty yourself. Empty yourself of everything you think, everything you feel, everything that you know, desire. Just completely empty yourself. Section 2, be filled. Not be filled with what you think, but be filled with what the Holy Spirit says. Be filled with what the Holy Spirit is doing. Be filled with what the Lord wants. And when you're filled with what the Lord wants, when you're filled with his presence, then you go in peace. I don't know if this is what Wade does, but this is what the Lord invited me into. When I noticed Wade's kind of the way that Wade would prepare this, and when I asked the Lord, what do you want me to know about it? This is what he showed me. He showed me what it looks like to go in peace. And to see what I'm talking about, we got to take a trip back to the big house, back to the big game, Michigan and Ohio State, because there was a moment where Michigan, Ohio State are knotted up at 17, and all of a sudden, all of the energy, if you're a Michigan fan, all of the energy was sucked out of the stadium when Zak Zinter went down. Because when he went down, you could have heard a pin drop. All the momentum, gone. All the energy, gone. All the belief, gone. All the ego, gone. But what happened next? What happened next is a picture of what happens when we empty ourselves. What happens next, what the crowd did next, is a picture of what God does with an empty vessel. There was a shot of emotion. There was a shot of energy. There was momentum that infused the Michigan team when the crowd began to come alive. As they carted Zak off of the field, they began to chant, "Let's go, Zak. Let's go, Zak. Let's go, Zak." Joel Klatt was one of the commentators for the game, and he describes it as something that he had never heard before, never seen before in all of his years of commentating and announcing college football games. What that Michigan crowd did for that Michigan Wolverine team in that moment is a picture of what the Lord does for us when we step onto the battlefield, when we step onto the gridiron, if you will, of the place that he's inviting us into. When we step into that place and we empty ourselves, we make room for the Lord to fill us. And so step 1 is anytime you go out to share the gospel, anytime that you go somewhere that the Lord is inviting you into, I want you to begin this process that Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 talks about. Blessed are the poor in spirit. We're not talking about financially poor. We're talking about empty. You ever see a young kid running around, or growing up we had horses. You ever see a horse running around? Say, man, that horse is really spirited. Right? Kids, he's got a lot of spirit in him. The idea of being poor in spirit, being completely void of energy, being completely void and emptied of every preconceived notion. Because when we empty ourselves of everything we think, our awareness of the kingdom of heaven increases. And when we become aware of the kingdom's presence in our life, in the same way that Michigan became aware of the 12th man in their life, the crowd, the over 100,000 screaming fans, imploring them to put the ball into the end zone and take the lead. That's exactly what Jesus does in our life. That's exactly what Holy Spirit does in our life. That's exactly what the Father does in our life when we empty ourselves out of everything, good or bad. Because now we're in a position to be aware of the presence of the Holy Spirit, be aware of the presence of the kingdom. And when the kingdom is near, it does not matter what adversary is in front of us, because we are positioned to take the gospel across the line that the Lord is inviting us to walk into.